Virtual Summit 2025.
Hello, Melinda. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining. Thank you for hosting me.
So thank you so much for joining this Day One Virtual Summit, Kristen. So before you start your presentation, I would like to introduce you to the audience who you are. So, yes, women leaders maintain resilience and positivity in uncertain and so yes. So welcome on stage, Kristen Francis. In a world marked by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, resilience is key. But grounded positivity is the secret weapon.
Yep.
Kristen Francis, a powerhouse in leadership and cultural transformation, introduces a dynamic framework that equips women leaders to navigate change with confidence. With nearly 3 decades of experience, she provides actionable strategies to foster values driven leadership in a rapidly evolving business landscape. This is your roadmap to leading with clarity, conviction, and unwavering optimism. Wow, that's really a wonderful topic chosen by Kristen Francis. So the stage is all yours. So we can able to see the PowerPoint presentation. So you can start.
Thank you, Melinda. And could we have the first slide, please?
Yes, we are on the first slide.
No, the second one, I mean, the following slide.
Okay.
So basically, today I'm here with you to share some experience, insights, skills, and tools that I hope you will find not only interesting, but also useful. And I love this picture. This picture is of me, and I'm proud to say. And what's on the picture is something that I live with and live by, and it's about let me fall if I must. The person I become will hold me. So the idea is how we women will be able to build, jump from a cliff and try to assemble our airplane going down in this VUCA world. So if we look at the current landscape of multi-crisis, the world we are navigating is one of unprecedented volatility, uncertainty, and ambiguity. And yet, it is precisely such times that leadership is tested and expected to elevate. And women, specifically women, are stepping up with resilience, vision, and innovation to counter current complexities and create the new normal. Despite all the effort, the progress has been very slow. And we still face systematic barriers, cultural barriers, and personal barriers towards advancing this agenda. This agenda requires a collective effort and a collaborative approach to accelerate the process because when women achieve key leadership positions, her impact is felt and her added value not only impacts the organization internally, it also impacts the organization externally. Now, let's explore a bit of facts before we jump into grounded positivity. Did you know that closing the gender gap globally will take 134 years? And also that will the closing the economic participation. And this is based on a report by the Gender Gap Report of 2024. Female-founded businesses produce 10% more revenues than other businesses over a period of 5 years, yet they only get 2% of whatever VC funding is present out there. The presence of women on board and in business leadership impacts critical indicators from environmental to social to governance, and they impact also the bottom line. Yet we only see 6% as CEOs, and till this year, we only have 23% of women on boards. So basically, the bigger risk is that women in leadership number is dropping since 22 regularly, also based on the gender report. So what are some challenges? We might ask ourselves why. And this is all due to existing norms and also beliefs and inherited roles. The existence of certain law that could limit women or the lack of existence of other laws and also regulations that are hindering the presence of women in leadership. So are organizational barriers. And we should never also forget when it comes to personal barriers and how to navigate it. It is also important to understand what are the missed opportunities. Data shows that diverse, inclusive, and equitable leadership and cultures are twice in organization, are twice more likely to exceed financial targets, 3 times more likely to be high for performing, 6 times more likely to be innovative, to reduce risk and agile, and 8 times more likely to achieve business success. So here I would say that we have a big opportunity to grab. More importantly, inclusive leaders enhance the individual sense of belonging and feeling of inclusion by 70%. It also increases performance of individuals within organizations by 17%, and it also increases collaboration by 29%. So there is a better stakeholder understanding when it comes to organization, which also impacts the understanding of how to innovate the product, so on and so forth. So these are the facts, the challenges, and the opportunities that are facing women in leadership. My name, can we move to the second slide, please? This is a picture of me in Lebanon, and now I'll tell you the story. So my name is Christine Francis, you know that already, and I'm a leadership and a culture transformation expert. Grounded positivity as a leadership skill and toolkit has been sparked in the wake of the Beirut Revolution, my country, my beloved country, Lebanon, the pandemic, and the August 4 Beirut blast, not to mention the fiscal and economic crisis. I realized at that time that we are all in the same storm, but on different boats. Some have yachts, others have rafts, and some of us are drowning. I also realized that it is not personal because it was a collective thing. And if we speak about COVID, it was a worldwide pandemic, yet it is very intimate. And it's intimate to each one of us. It impacts us differently. Me being me, I could not stand and watch. Equipped with a history of living in a country filled with uncertainty, growing up during the war, living a first-hand experience with a deep understanding of change and transition from within, learning how to navigate ambiguity constantly have strengthened my resilience. So, building on my expertise and long experience, working with hundreds of leaders and clients across the globe, as a coach and a leadership and culture transformation expert, I had a strong belief that we might be focusing on what is important rather than what really matters. I was inspired by some of the people who were super hopeful, and also I was inspired by the people who lacked hope and wanted to bridge the gap of both and find a common ground that is accessible to all of us to counter the VUCA we are living individually and collectively. Grounded positivity is not the absence of negativity at all. It is this place in the middle of a spectrum. And this is why you see the picture of me and my daughter in the middle of the spectrum, right? With awareness and intentionality, trying to keep pushing, bouncing forward, creating a new normal, and driving result. It is all about transitioning with action versus inaction, anchored in reality with curiosity and hope, and understanding that no matter how hard the situation is, we always have a choice. And this is where our control lies. After that, I designed a product that supported leaders and organizations, as well as developed a specific product under grounded positivity for women in the workplace to upskill, plan transition, and influence. So that's the little story of how it all came together. Can we move with the slide, please? So how do we, there is an important factor. We need to understand that there's a difference between change, transition, and transformation. Change is rational and it happens outside of us. And most of the time, it is outside of our control. Transition is something that is internal process that takes place in our mind, and it is emotional. So we have to understand what's going from an emotional level to be able to plan transition. And change plus transition equals behavioral change. And this is what we are aiming for. It's not only the mind shift that needs to happen, it's how behavioral change or structural alignments internally within organizations will support the change and transition. So mind shift plus behavioral change equals transformation. So change requires a planned transition for the transformation to take place and to be sustainable. Next, please. What is a grounded positive leader? And when we look at the work that I do, what are we focusing on? So basically, we are working on specific skills that are required to navigate the VUCA world. We have certain tools that most likely we will not be able to touch on with the little time we have, but I can give you an idea about them. And the most important key is adaptive resilience. So moving forward, we're going to be talking about the skills needed, maybe one or two tools, and what is adaptive resilience, and what's the difference between resilience and adaptive resilience, and how we can build that muscle together. Next, please. Again, in any situation, as we said, change is outside of our control, and most of the time we don't have any say in it. It is important to focus on what is under our locus of control compared to what is outside our locus of control. And once we are able to do that with the focus and the intentionality and the awareness, we will be able to plan the transition based on what is within our circle of control. Next, please. When we look at the barriers that face women, we already spoke about some very generally, but we are talking about three main barriers. We're talking about the cultural barriers, which are the norms, beliefs, and the assigned role. We are also talking about the laws and regulations. And this is basically outside our locus of control. This is a transition and a transformation that needs to take on a collective level. But this does not mean that we do not have, power to do some impact there. Now, when we look at the organizational barrier, and this is specifically where the systematic barriers are impacting women to reach leadership positions, we will see that organizational culture that does not support gender diversity, equity, and inclusion could be a barrier. Command and control leadership styles could be a barrier because most leadership positions until today are held by by men. And there is the collective and systemic bias. The collective systemic bias is also present not only in the thought and behavior, but they are also reflected in the system. And this is something we need to look at. The lack of inclusive HR policies would support the presence of women and reduces the leaky pipeline when women start leaving the organization. And there is also what we call the broken rung, which is impacting the middle leadership from reaching the senior leadership in order to create the critical mass we talk about that will provide the positive impact on the collective of the people within the organization, the bottom line, and the few things we spoke about. Now, this also could be within our locus of control, depending on the role we play within that organization. So if we are senior management, or maybe we are in the HR department, we could influence that change. Now, where our power lies and the control 100% lies is in the barriers that we face internally, or interpersonal barriers. So what are these? These could be coming from self-limiting belief, lacking, it is the tension between confidence and courage, or confidence and competence. Unfortunately, data shows that women suffer from what we call the imposter syndrome. And I'm not talking about all women, and this does not mean that also men do not face that syndrome. But what it is about, it's when their competence is higher, is higher than their confidence. Where if we look at the majority of male leaders, their confidence is higher, mostly could be higher than their competence. We are looking at stereotypes and biases, and these are sometimes personal stereotypes and biases that we women have them against ourselves. And we're looking about the what do you call it, the double bind between competence and likability, because women sometimes suffer, not suffer, are always, either called aggressive because they are assertive, or she's too likable, she's not leadership material. So we need to see how to navigate that, the sticky floor and the glass feeling, and definitely the work-life integration, which is key for women because we still carry the load of caregiving across the mainly across the globe. And this has proven during COVID, because most of the women had to leave their jobs to attend to people within the house, from the children and schooling to elderly care. Can we move, please? Let's look at the key. These are 6 key skills that we will be discussing, but mainly we're going to be focusing on 3 of them, all right? Or 4 of them. So first of all, the main key of leadership when it comes to grounded positivity is having clarity on what our values are and making sure that our decisions are value based, because this is when we are able to pick ourselves up even when we make the wrong decision, because we are engraved in the values that drive us, and we will not regret. We will learn something and will apply something else. So our focus now is going to be on ease with uncertainty, social and emotional intelligence, the growth mindset, and adaptive resilience. Can we move, please? I'm not going to go into that quadrant. I'm sure you all know it. It is the AQ quadrant by Daniel Goldman. So what are we talking about? Self-awareness leads to self-care and management, which leads to behavioral control, which means we are not triggered. Our actions are not triggered, externally triggered. So we are able to manage our emotions, understand them, and act upon this as messenger rather as something that trigger us, and that might impact the result we drive. So usually when we act from an emotional intelligence place, we drive good results for us and others. We are able, when we do that, we are able to manage our relationships, which is really important for women when it comes to navigating the barriers that they face into stepping into higher leadership positions. Can we move, please? One of the key things to understand is how all our brains function. So our brains function from system 1 or system 2. So if we look at system 1, we see that it operates automatically and quickly. So it means we're acting without emotional intelligence because we are triggered, and this triggered is driving a result that most of the time is not something that we are like. So it is instinctive, it is automatic, and it doesn't take any effort. It is very important for us to realize that we need to learn how to operate from system 2, where we allocate attention and efforts to what we want to drive within this relationship or within this environment in order for us to achieve our goal in whatever the agenda is when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Next slide, please. Accessing our growth mindset in times of crisis and in times of challenges is key. And the good thing about the growth mindset, which is either, the mindset, which is either fixed or growth, is it is accessible to us. Again, on that middle of the spectrum, and for me, everything is a spectrum, because anything, even when it's positive in excess, is limiting, and when it is negative, it's also limiting. So being in that middle of the spectrum with intentionality is to access our growth mindset when it comes to how we build our skills, or how do we look at skills for the future, and what do we need to develop in ourselves? How do we look into challenges? Do we see them as something that we can avoid or something we can create opportunities from? How much effort we put into that? How do we receive feedback when feedback is given? Do we see it as criticism? Do we take it personally, or do we consider it as a gap to be filled? And definitely, with every cycle of change, there will be setbacks. So, how do we view setbacks? Is it something that we take as a learning lesson and do something differently, or we give up? So, these are the five key areas of mindset that we need to consider when we want intentionally to access our growth mindset. Next, please. Now, coming to the VUCA world, best thinking is in demand today and tomorrow. So basically, from everything that has been happening since 5 years ago and maybe from before, we have been living in a VUCA world. And VUCA stands for volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. So, how do we normally counter VUCA? When we look at VUCA and we look at volatility specifically, understanding what's going around and having a new clear vision is something that counters volatility. Now, when it comes to uncertainty, understanding is key. So basically, if we look at all the organizations that really survived, or leaders that survived within COVID, there was a high level of understanding. And if we look at the countries that were navigated by women leaders at the time, we will see that action was taken very fast, and even casualties were less. Why? Because they were able to understand what is happening. They have sought the advice of specialized people, and they kind of navigated this uncertainty with risk mitigations and things like that. Complexity is countered by clarity, and ambiguity is countered by agility. Flexibility is key in times of crisis. So we need to see how we can develop agility to be nimble, fast, but always anchored in our values, vision to drive the best outcome for the collective. So when we want to navigate a VUCA world, we have to do an internal and external audit. We have to revisit what is relevant and how relevant are we, to see what we need to do to pivot in that area. Also, we need to identify new opportunities, and this requires a growth mindset. So in every crisis, there is an opportunity that surfaces. We women had kind of benefited from so many opportunities when it came to flex work, to hybrid work, and to completely online work that we were fighting for before COVID, and we did not have it because the mindset was not ready, the mind shift was not there, and also the proof that it could be done, it was not there. Now I know that there is a counter thing around it today, but it's not something that will be taken away from us anytime soon, or from any leader, as a matter of fact, because agility and flexibility is key. And also, we have to learn how to mitigate risks with plans. So basically, we do our audits, and then we start designing plans, and then we identify the necessary steps of what we should do next. And we also bring the collective to align with our vision with clarity, and also to get commitment on what we are doing together. Can we move one more slide, please? Can we move one more slide, please? Now, one of the key things that impacts our personal barriers as women leaders is actually a tension between focus and self care, as well as focus on impact. We women are driven by impact by nature. We are the bearer of the future, right? So we are also always driven to create something better. This is one side of it. But we are also driven by impact because studies have shown that women are evaluated for positions on their track record, whereas men are evaluated on their potential. So, in the back of our mind, if we want to be in that position or become a board member or a business owner, we are driven by impact. And this actually affects our burnout rate at a much higher level because we don't know how to self-care. So one of the key tools in grounded positivity is how to make sure that we keep our energy containers filled. And what are our energy containers? They are four. There is the mind, there is the the mind, the physical, the mind, the emotions, and the spirit. So when we look at these four containers and we understand what they are to us, and we evaluate how empty they are. And by the way, there is a free assessment on Harvard, by Harvard, that you can do in order to test which container needs filling more and what are the habits that you can put in place. Why is it important to fill our emotional containers? Not only to mitigate the tension between self-care and burnout, but it also strengthens our resilience. It also strengthens our emotional intelligence to enhance our social intelligence by managing relationships and driving outcomes. And when we look at these four containers, on the level of the styles of leadership, I would like to share with you a graph that is a combination between the work I do with the Barrett Center, which is the Leadership and Culture Transformation Assessment, and also the energy containers. Can we move, please? So if we look at this spectrum, you will see that from level 1 to level 7, we are navigating, right, from being a crisis manager to a service leader. So in order to be better crisis manager, relationship manager, and performance manager, we need to ensure that our physical and emotional containers are filled. For our transformation needs, we need to make sure that our mental container is filled. And in order to become of service and others and create more clarity, more alignment, more commitment within our teams, we have to look at our spiritual container. So a question could be, what are the things I need to start doing? Or what are the things that I need to take into consideration to fill my energy containers based on how much I need to fill them? So I'm looking here at habits. I'm looking here at stopping things, maybe adding things. Thank you. Can we move forward, please? Now we come to adaptive resilience. And why is adaptive resilience also important for grounded positivity? In the following slide, I have defined resilience as it is and adaptive resilience as it belongs to grounded positivity. Can we move the slide, please? Okay, so when we look at resilience, it is our ability to bounce back when life throws challenges on our way based on previous experience of overcoming obstacles. So I'm going to give an example in a little while. Adaptive resilience, on the other hand, is about our ability to bounce forward, no matter how volatile, uncertain, and ambiguous and complex things are, while maintaining a high level of adaptability and believing that everything is possible. So again, being anchored in reality with curiosity and hope, and knowing that we have choices. It reflects the concept of grounded positivity. So an example of this, let's say as a certain state in the world is usually hit by a hurricane on yearly basis, and for the past years the hurricane has been moving in a certain pattern. So what happens from resilience perspective, those who are normally hit by that affected are usually more mitigating risk better than those that were not hit. And this is resilience because it's based on history. As a matter of fact, to be more adaptive, we have to understand that what is coming next is not necessarily what was happening before. So even if I'm outside the way, I am, as a leader, it is my responsibility to put together a plan that mitigates other possibilities by building my adaptive resilience to the future, aligning my people on what could happen. And then when something happens, we are ready. We're not just taken by storm. Can we move to the next slide, please? So here, when we look at the 5 steps, you will see that the first step is to really remain anchored in grounded positivity, to accept what is, to accept what is happening and to see how to move forward. And when we start adapting, it means we are accepting what is no longer possible. We are letting go of things that are not serving us, but we are also bringing forward our strength. So by bouncing forward, we are adjusting and we are finding new ways of doing things, okay, in order to change what is coming next while remaining anchored in our values. Again, we are not letting go of what we stand for, but we are seeing how to navigate it better. And then it is about rebuilding and sorry. These are questions that, if you can take a photo of, will take you through the process of building the 5 steps of adaptive resilience. So I would like you, if possible, to take a photo shot of this slide so you can do the exercise after our sessions or after the whole conference. So we are looking at what is your vision of the new normal, and are you still anchored in your values? So if you go through this questionnaire, you can start thinking of how to build this adaptive resiliency. Can we move to the next slide, please? Okay, so now coming back to the internal push and pull of strategies and the methods we can invest in ourselves as women leaders to navigate everything that we are facing. And when I look at this slide, you will see that there is a role for the organization. And usually, as I said, it is outside our locus of control, but sometimes it could be under our influence. So what we need to look, what is the role of organizations? Organizations need to foster a culture that supports diversity, equity, and inclusion internally and externally. They need to center the DEI in the business strategy. They need to make women visible through data, because what gets measured gets managed. It's also, they need to look at all their HR policies of recruitment, retention, promotion, etc., flex time, family-friendly policies, all of that. Organizations also need to prioritize learning and development, and not only for women, but also for men, because men are, we need to bring them over as allies to support this agenda. As I said at the beginning, it is a collective effort, and they have to have a special program for mentoring and sponsoring for women within the organization. Now, where our control lies is the role of the leader. So as leaders, we are responsible for our own continuous learning and development. We need to build our grounded positivity leadership skills and tools. We need to develop our language of competence. And what does that mean? It means we have to have a deeper understanding of the facts, the barriers, the opportunities. We need to have a deep understanding of the biases, whether personal or systematic, that we are facing, so we can navigate them with social and emotional intelligence and a language of competence that will drive the end in mind or the result that we want to achieve. We need to seek coaching. We need to seek mentors. We need to strengthen our negotiation skills, because women usually are not great at negotiation for themselves. They are fantastic to negotiate for others. And we need to deal with our tension between competence and confidence, which is the imposter syndrome. We need to overcome burnout by not committing to more, and we need to create a support system. Now, to close our session today, I would like us to go back to the barriers that we started with and to see how we can mitigate or navigate them with grounded positivity. So, if we look, sorry, 1 second. Yes, are we on the same slide? Can we move to the next slide, please? Okay, so when we look at the internal, at the cultural barriers, as I said, to navigate although they are not under our locus of control, but we need to play a role in making women more visible through data and to share more role modeling and success stories. We need to coach and mentor and give feedback and influence. As for the things that are relevant to laws, regulations, and national policies, and if we take that into the context of organizations, we need to build our strong network to lobby and to join active associations that are doing so. So this is the little role we can play, but we can play a role. When we look at the organizational barrier, we need to learn how to use the language of competence to highlight your experience and attributes that you bring on the table. You need to use social and emotional intelligence to break biases and manage conflicts in relationships. We need to have unease with uncertainty to prove that we are risk alert and not risk avert, because women are normally identified or attributed towards avertness of risk, although studies have showed that they are more risk alert. And we need to build allyship within the stakeholders we are working with to influence mindset and probably create more space for women to take on leadership positions. Now, when we come to the internalized personal barriers, we have to have clarities on our values and purpose. So who we are, what is our values, what are our track records, what are we good at, and what is the purpose of all of that. We have to ensure that we are focusing on our internal locus of control rather than our external. And this is very key, because normally when we are faced with barriers, we sometimes feel like we are a victim in that situation. If you ever feel a victim, please remember that you are focusing on things you cannot control. However, when you focus on things you can control, you become the player in your own life, and you kind of achieve whatever you aspire to or any position you would like to reach. So we have to also access our growth mindset. And finally, we have to fill our energy containers, as well as create a good support system that can help us together achieve what we want to achieve, which is more space for women within the workplace and in leadership. With this, I come to the end of my presentation. I am happy to have any feedback, any questions. If we still have the time, Niraja, do we still have the time?
Yeah, thank you so much for the great presentation, Kristen. So yes, we do have a question from our audience. So here is the question. Can you share a personal experience where grounded positivity helped you overcome a leadership challenge?
Yes. Yeah, I will take you back to when I used to work within the architecture industry, and it was mainly a male-dominated environment. And I remember very well that when I joined this company, although I had a BS in architecture at that time, what happened is my boss, which became a mentor later in my life, and he has really taught me most of the business and overcoming barriers lesson. Started kind of dealing with me as if I'm like a secretary, in the sense of, do you know how to do this? Do you know how to do a photocopy? Do you know how to do a coffee. And I'll tell you a little story, a little story that takes me back a bit of my experience with gender diversity. I was brought up in a house with a family that did not differentiate between men and women. So basically, I was empowered in that, believing and confident enough that I can do anything. So the way I managed the whole situation is at this level. So basically, I always took a challenge as a good opportunity to prove something. So with time, I was able to take all this negative perception of my capacity, my capability, or my competence, and turn it around into proving what I can do. So basically, this helped me a lot in advancing. And I've always been a values driven person. And I always saw in life, I was always acting from a growth mindset, in the sense of anything that is coming my way is something I need to evaluate, and I need to see how it impacts me and how it impacts others. So through that experience, I was able to build more, emotional intelligence, more social intelligence. And I remember very well that one of the key things that I have adopted in grounded positivity, which is the mitigation risk and having different plans, is one day that same person told me, don't you ever come back to me with a problem without three solutions. And this was what has built kind of a mindset for me to be anchored in grounded positivity. So I acknowledge what was not going well, and I always knew how I want to go and what direction I want to go, and I used all the skills that I have been able to put together in order for me to advance. This is my little story with that.
Thanks you for sharing the little story with Global Virtual Summit 2025 and the great presentation. So please do join our next speakers sessions as well and encourage them. And ladies and gentlemen, we are very strict on the timings. It's 25 minutes of talk time and 5 minutes for Q&A. If it is keynote speaker, you will get 30 minutes of talk time and 5 minutes for Q&A. And please do join before 30 minutes prior to your presentation. So if you don't join, we will move your presentation to the next event. So we have, because the people, the other speakers are waiting, and we value our time and their time as well. Please do respect others' values time. Thank you, and please do join our next speaker session, Margaret J. Millett.
Thank you. Thank you.